Hi, this is Tom for PokerVIP.com and welcome to part 3 of my series on pot limit Omaha here at TonyBet. So the left-hand table we have a €25 table, the right-hand table we have a €50 table and a very loose one at that. The big stack is playing incredibly loose, playing close to 100 VPIP and is showing up with some very, very weird hands. He just showed up with deuces that called a 3-bet in a hand versus me just before I started recording. And he's also been overcalling some 3-bets with hands like King 6-5-4 single suited, far too loose. So it'll be interesting to see what spots we find ourselves in with him. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to really extract much money off him, just given from the fact that we've been playing about 10 hands before I started recording, and unfortunately he's hit in a couple of instances versus us. But hopefully, over the course of this video, we can find some decent profitable spots versus this gentleman, who, as I said, appears to be playing very, very loose. On the left-hand table, I've got a few familiar faces from the previous videos. We have a short stack who is limping close to 100% range as well. So again, that's going to shift the dynamic of the table a bit. We're just going to overlimp here, see if we can basically connect with some sort of miracle flop. If we don't, we're just going to be done with the hand. And folding the weak jack. One thing we have seen on the right-hand table a decent chunk of the time is the big stack has been posting a straddle, and that's also going to change the dynamic of the game. We'll see if he continues to do so. He's also been making very, very small sort of clicky 3-bets a lot, which in general is not going to be an enormously profitable route in PLO, but yeah, it seems to be something he's mixing into his strategy. And that's again going to lead to some weird and wonderful spots. Opening the 9s on the left-hand table, it's pretty reasonable button open. Ticklebot is burning the camera time before he calls. It's a good flop for range, but it's actually a pretty disappointing flop for the hand I have. Given how loose people are playing on this site and how wide they're calling down, plus the fact there are 2 people in this pot, even with a good chunk of aces in my range and some backdoors, we are not going to be bluffing this flop. Turn is going to further help calling ranges versus raising ranges. And we're going to continue with our plan to take our very limited showdown to the river. Hopefully we can check it through. Very, very, very occasionally we're good, but against any part of any value range we're doing remarkably poorly. Gemilov has shown how loose he is. He's just somehow called many raises with that hand and proceeded to flop pretty damn well, but somehow my 9s are good, so the plan of taking showdown with basically nothing apparently works. So can work occasionally. Another junky hand on the right table. Given the crazy amounts of action that are going up, it's kind of disappointing that we're getting so many poor hands. It does appear that Ticklebot is a little salty over that one. Although truthfully, I think you pronounce it Jamilov. It is running remarkably well at the moment. I want to say that's how you pronounce his name. Not 100%. The perils of making videos like this are occasionally you are presented with some pretty unpronounceable names. With weak kings, I'm leaning towards a call more than a 3-bet and playing the hand in position. The hands, I mean, it's okay, but it's not so strong that we want to start really altering the SPR. And where our opponent pots, like given how wide he's playing, it's certainly conceivable he can have this. This would typically favor a calling range, but in general, pot size bets are going to be horribly unbalanced. when used by somewhat weaker players. So just a pair and some backdoors, which is going to be ditching. It's just going to be better spots against people like that, and hopefully we can find some of those. Jammy Love has straddled. If this was suited to the king, it'd certainly be a raise. As it is, it's probably a raise and cut off and a fold in the spot I am in, given that I'm in the effective UTG +1 with the straddle, at least pre-flop. As I said, the straddle is going to alter the way that the game's going to play pre-flop. And in essence, I'm one position earlier than I would be otherwise. As such, I've got to shift ranges across a bit. Once we get post-flop, then obviously I have position over the guide, but we're not going to make money from this guy by opening particularly wide and being exploited by others. We're going to make money by playing a good part of value range and playing it hard and extracting value. And yeah, he's decided to defend a straddle with that, which I'm not expecting him to fold a straddle, well, basically ever, to be honest. Tens under the gun were also a totally reasonable fold. On the left-hand table, pretty reasonable raise and cutoff. Under the gun +1, it's pretty loose but reasonable in certain tables. Under the gun, it's just going to be far, far too wide. So I'm not really expecting on the right-hand table Jammy Love to be folding a particularly high percentage of the time, so it is very surprising when he folds his big blind. But I don't think over the course of this video we're going to see that happening too frequently. Festivan is going to find themselves in a really awkward spot on this flop of the right-hand table just because it's going to favour calling ranges, and it is so draw heavy. So much of his range is broadways, which are going to have like gut shots, possibly open-enders, some overpairs with flushes. So he's going to have a reasonable check call range, namely aces and kings with flushes, open-enders with non-nut flushes, that kind of stuff. But he can't really bet too much on that flop, you know, without the really strong parts of his range, just because it's going to hit the calling range so hard and he's just going to get raised a very high percentage of the time. Again, very disappointing hand on the right-hand table. Even with the overcall, we're going to be folding. It's always a bit frustrating when we have a very loose player on a table like this and we don't really have the necessary hands to get involved and try and exploit his very loose play. But trying to combat incredibly loose play with very loose play on our end is going to basically mean that we're going to get exploited by the other three players on the table. And we can also get ourselves in spots where we just have huge domination issues and end up paying off in spots that we wouldn't have been in otherwise. Sixes don't seem to be a hand I should be getting all that excited about, especially facing an under the gun open. Be interested to see if King Kong decides to rebuy or if he's just deciding to essentially 3-bet, try and spin his hand back up, or his stack back up, which I have seen quite a lot. I've seen quite a few people who don't have the auto rebuy option on and just attempt to spin the stack up the times they happen to get clobbered. That's a pretty sick runner. He did have a fairly reasonable hand to go with, to be fair to the guy, and the overcall of nines is pretty ropey in the extreme. Going to be opening the double suited, double paired hand on the button. Getting 2 calls. Flopping a set, probably the most disguised of the sets. Our jacks also help us in the way that they are blocking quite a few of the combo draws, namely Jack 10-9, Queen Jack 10. As turns go, that's pretty disappointing, truthfully. Opponent leads, which is never a particularly good sign. We're just going to be calling and hoping for a board pair here, which is not forthcoming. Somewhat disappointing outcome given the nature of the flop. And weird check. We're just going to be checking back here. Turns out our set's good, and he turned a random 9 into a bluff. I guess you can do that once in a while. It's not unreasonable. It would typically work better with the Ace of Heart blocker. Don't love the fact that Massage just decided to 3-bet us, but again, with the overcall, we are priced in. Again, not exactly a flop I can get excited about. Pot size bet doesn't really make much sense with just about any part of his range, but does mean I'm going to be folding, but frankly, any sizing he bets is going to mean I'm going to fold anyway. So. Given the number of people in the pot, calling here is just going to be a pretty terrible play from my end. We are crushing the board, but we are basically in a spot where we want to be able to get money in on turns. So we are going to put the raise in. You know, very rare occasions our opponent happens to have 2-pair, happens to have a set of kings. More likely it's going to be like a ace queen jack draw. Quads work. Nice little hand my way. Again, like facing an under the gun open, we aren't obligated to 3-bet our kings. We're going to face a good chunk of 4-bets, but also most of the hands he's raising under the gun are going to be, if he's playing a reasonably standard range, are going to be big suited and double suited broadways, aces, kings, although we do have 2 of them, and some very good queens. And very occasionally, like a hand like, well, not very occasionally, hands like ace, king, jack, jack, but that, you know, is like a high broadways suited with pair. And the point is they're all going to play pretty well versus kings. There's no part of his opening range that kings is just crushing that I want to 3-bet. The sort of start building a pot versus. Against a very loose player, perhaps I do, but he doesn't appear to be a loose player at all. So I'm totally cool with just mixing calls in with kings. It's by no means an obligatory 3-bet there at all. Well, we said Gemma Love was going to get himself in some trouble spots, and that appears to be one of them. If this was a slightly higher rundown, we would be playing it under the gun, but as is, we're not. If it was like even like Jack 10 8 7, we'd be playing. It is right on the borderline. Certainly a raise there is not a mistake. But given the fact that both of these tables, there are so many people taking flops, it just means that we essentially have to take our rundowns and move them sort of a pip or so higher than we would do otherwise, just for domination issues, really. So we've got a nice double up on the left-hand table. Unfortunately, the right-hand table, that has not occurred yet, but here's hoping. The sixes, if for some reason this pot is raised and we are going to go heads up, we will be defending. The more people involved in the pot, the less likely we are to defend. We would be defending the big blind here. Defending the small blind incentivizes the big blind to call, means we're going to play the entire hand out of position, and the hand isn't as strong as it appears. And 3-betting against someone this loose is just going to be a folly. And folding versus the ISO here. Evicus is deciding to limp his entire range. I mean, it could be pretty much anything, really. There's a slightly different scenario here in that we're facing Jammy and he is raising cutoff rather than under the gun. So we are going to be 3-betting here and attempting to take him heads up and hopefully get a decent flop and get some stacks in. If one of the big blinds decides to call 4-bet us, then we kind of hate life, but we'll cross that bridge if we get to it. Taking a call, pretty disappointing flop. It's going to hit his calling range far better than ours. Raising range, checking back, trying to turn a jack, trying to turn a king, trying to turn a heart. Seems like a good start to things. Ace is not terrible just because we are going to have a good chunk of aces here. Once he checks, I think I'm prepared to turn this hand into a bluff now. And I'm going to overcall the aces. It's not strong enough to play for stacks against a 200 big blind stack. And yeah, we get it through with the kings. It's just a really good bluff card for us. So, you know, if we're not prepared to use that as a bluff card versus a check-check line, then we just shouldn't be through-betting kings there. And the aces, now that the hand on the round table's ended, as I said, it's not an obligatory 3-bet just because, well, one, there's two people already raised in the pot, but also the stack size considerations. There's really two schools of thought with the aces. The Jay Nando school is that you should be 3-betting all the time. It's the best way to realize your equity, which certainly is true if you run it on a purely math-based level and, you know, removed all other variables. There's also the Galfond school of thought, which is more that you certainly can 3-bet your stronger combos of aces, but sort of weaker ones, you know, disconnected with a suit and indeed your rainbow ones, you can just smooth, you know, especially when there's multiple people in the pot, that your raise isn't really going to achieve anything because no one's going to fold, you're not altering the SPR, and you're going to take the hand multi-way and bloated. And I think of the two, I certainly was part of the Jay Nando school of thought for a while. I kind of shifted over to the Galfond school of smoothing some aces in certain spots, and I think that is a perfectly reasonable spot to be smoothing aces there. As I said, given stack size and the fact we're out of position and there is already a raise and call in front, the 3-bet is just going to bloat the pot. We're going to be taking it multi-way, and it's not going to really achieve what we want to. We're going to be facing some very difficult decisions out of position, and that's not necessarily something I want to do. Plus, there is the added bonus if we happen to hit top set. Our hand is beautifully disguised on the rare occasions it happens to happen. So that's something that I've definitely gone to and fro on, but it's I think the approach I'm taking now is probably the better approach long term, of a more mixed strategy and playing slightly less aggressive with the weaker ace combos. And the results I have with it so far seem to be reasonably good. It's something I will remain open-minded about, of course, but for the moment I think the logic underpinning the decisions is reasonably sound. Double suit deuces, pretty simple fold. Facing this similar problem as we were the last time with the ace-10 hand, in that Jammy is going to be just raising his button with an incredibly wide range. As it is, completing here with a nut suit is far from the worst play. Flopping twosies, we are going to lead. Do block some of the straights with a 4. We're very likely to have the best hand at this point, but our hand is going to get progressively worse on many streets, just from the fact that we really only improve on a 10, an ace, and a deuce that are not diamonds, in the case of the 10. And the times we make the full house, it's kind of difficult to get paid anyway. Queens are a little weaker than the king, so I'm totally cool with just calling. Again, with an ace blocker, I could be convinced to 3-bet, but without that, I think calling is fine. It's too strong to fold, but I think it's also too weak to 3-bet. I have position. Let's play the game of trying to hit straight, trying to hit a set. That is neither of the above. I guess I have a gut shot and backdoor quads with the 6. I also block a good number of wraps with my queens, but given 3 people in the pot, that's less of a consideration. If this has been checked and it's heads up, it's certainly tempting to turn it into a bluff, and indeed I probably would be. I think into 3 people, turning this into a bluff would be optimistic in the extreme. Every time I seem to look at the left-hand table, Evicus has let his stack dwindle down, and somehow he gets a double up. But fair play to him for doing it. Which can be folding. Not especially because I think Jammy is nutted, but I also don't think he's ever folding a 2-pair combination, even as weak as 6-5. So I don't see a reason to get particularly aggressive against somebody who I'm starting to believe doesn't have a working fold button. At least not once he's put serious amounts of money in the pot. The river should theoretically favour the raiser unless they've raised the wrap, which in all probability they would have led turn with. The only hand that raised turn that's particularly disgusted is exactly that ace-jack. Unfortunately, Jammy's left. Sad times. We are going to raise our single suited connected Broadway though. It's a Murph type flop. I'm perfectly fine with checking back. It's such a coordinated board that I don't think betting is going to achieve much. We do have a good number of turn cards that are going to help our hand as well. That, unfortunately, is not one of them. We have cap range, but we are going to peel one and effectively make him fire river. Although that's also a pretty disappointing river, truthfully. Again, I don't see much value in bluffing here. He's going to have a good chunk of busted draws, which we're beating anyway, and the times he has two pair plus, I don't really see him folding. And the times he has aces, I guess he also probably doesn't fold either. That was a hand that had us absolutely slaughtered pre, which is somewhat unusual given the strength of the hand, but hey ho, it can happen. Kings, I face exactly the same situation I had with the aces, whereby 3-betting isn't going to accomplish much given the number of people in the pot. And I think we're going to go greedy and go for the check raiser. Double suited kings, we're going to be 3-betting versus a button open. And we actually end up turning the nut straight with a redraw and club blocker. I really can't depend on someone now suddenly deciding to bet, so we are just going to do our own betting here. There are times we're free rolling, there's times our opponents have picked up 2-pair and we're crushing them. And there's times we river royal flush. So that's also a thing. I actually don't think we're going to get paid too frequently. I certainly can't size up too large. I'm going to go about half pot, make it look like I'm blocking with ace-jack. We get called, sweet. Royal flush set, it's usually good. Kind of intrigued as to what our opponent actually showed up with. And he showed up with, yeah, a set of 10s that he turned, which is totally reasonable. The 10-7-6-4, and had the Jack-10 straight on the river, which is kind of the hand we're trying to target. Not thrilled at getting 3-bet here. It's kind of on the cusp of folding, and I think I probably will, in fact. Defend versus the min bet on the right-hand table. Flop a 4 with some back doors. We're going to defend once. And check through. Pick up a gut shot with the 10, but that's just about it. And folds to turn back. Yeah, he's complimenting me on my royal. Another player's joined on the right-hand table, although unfortunately not for the full stack. The post makes this somewhat awkward, as does his stack size. Overlimping is an option, raising is an option. We are going to go for the raise, we're going to go for the more aggressive approach. We do have a nut suit, it's moderately connected. And our opponent can have a completely random range. Getting the overcall on the big blind is somewhat disappointing. Was ideally hoping to take this heads up handed position. but that hasn't happened. And that's reasonably connected board. And getting led into kind of sucks. Don't really see a reason to float with my 9 and try and improve. There's actually some limited ways we improve anyway. Don't especially see a lead being there, being completely balanced. He is going to have some King Jack 10 draws, some Jack 10 8 draws, and some 2-pair plus. None of which we're doing all that well. It's very rarely going to be complete air that he leads there. Even Queen X that he leads, which would be weird, is still beating us. So the plan of abusing the post unfortunately didn't work with the overcall. So we are down a little bit on the round table, but we're up on the left. So easy come, easy go. The nut suit with a pair of 9s, we are going to be defending our big blind with. And that is a flop that's going to favour the raiser far more than the caller. And yeah, again, we are going to be defending our big blind about 50% of the time, and there's a good chunk of flops that we can potentially continue defending on, but this just isn't going to be one of them. No reason to chase bad money or attempt to bluff somebody in that spot. It's just going to have a fairly poor success rate. Hopefully the right-hand table doesn't break just before the end of this video. It would be a little bit disappointing. It's not a fantastic flop. That being said, I have been somewhat tight, so I'm hoping that we can bet our backdoors, get it through. There are going to be some turn cards that are going to help us, namely jacks, potentially 8s, diamonds, ace. It's a bit disappointing. Finding a fold. It is a good spot to raise, range versus range, but I felt that we were playing tight enough to potentially get respect. Sadly not. Going to be just calling our double-suited, double-paired hand. Again, no reason to 3-bet. And I actually think our ace is weak enough that I want to bet and protect the equity. Pretty spectacularly terrible turn card. Very much going to favour a caller than a raiser. The 6 actually helps us though. We are basically losing to ace-king at this point. We're just going to check through. Probably more than I could have hoped for, truthfully. Flopping very well on the left-hand table. We flop a double gut shot and a flush draw. Sadly didn't have much. Defending the double suited queens, I think that's pretty reasonable given the nature of the board. Just do it can certainly have parts of the low connected, as can I though, so we are going to be peeling once. I expect Massager to get out of the way, and we're going to evaluate the river. That's not a great river. He's basically telling the story of once upon a time I flopped 4-5, some low 2 pairs. I think we were calling on obviously any heart, any queen, and any of the low cards pairing. The king is just a bit disappointing, truthfully. Half pot somewhat screams of value trying to be paid. Problem is he's never betting king X for value. He's just going to be check calling that. Here we are, just going to do it, check. Very unfortunate spot. Overcalling, totally fine. Flopping a 10-8-6 draw. 2 choices here. I can either lead or I can check call. I think the presence of the Jack 10 draw dominating my 10-8 means check call is probably a more favourable option. Plus I have the problem of clubs as well. There is the possibility of turning the hand into a bluff on this turn card. Given we expect clubs to have bet, thus I have the uncapped part of range. I think that is what we are going to be doing, and it basically obligates us to fire most rivers. And we get it through, which is nice. Seem to be getting pretty horrible runouts in the big pots and picking up small ones, which isn't ideal, but at least we're picking up some. So I think we are going to play these two hands and then leave it there. We're going to be folding sixes, and we're just going to be checking through with our jacks. When our opponent checks, we're basically just going to bet and try and pick up. Fortunately, I can't type a manual number in, which is frustrating. Turning a 3 is pretty spectacularly good. And yeah, we just pick up, which is all good. So there is part 3. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. If you have any questions, comments, by all means, leave them below. And with that being said, I have been Tom for PokerVIP.com.